Hello everyone. Back again with film recaps. In this video, I will recap one of a horror mystery films from 2021, titled Fear Street Part 2 1978. Before we get to the storyline, I'd like to wish everyone a happy and great day. Without further ado, let's get straight to the storyline. As the title suggests, this movie is a direct sequel to Fear Street Part 1, 1994 that I recapped in my previous video. So, if you haven't watched the first one, I suggest you see it first before watching this recap. The movie opens in year 1994, by showing us a house in the town of Shadyside, where a woman lives alone and is watching the news on TV covering the recent murders of Simon and Kate, aka Dina's friends from the previous movie. There is a note on her table. It is the same note that Sheriff Good left in the previous movie, signifying that this woman and Sheriff Good know something about the terrors that has been happening in Shadyside. We learn that this woman lives in constant fear, judging from the number of locks she has installed on her doors, and the lengths she goes through to ensure her windows are shut tight, as well as the number of alarm clocks she owns. Later that night, the woman is woken up from her sleep by the sound of someone trying to break into her house. She goes to hide her dog in the closet, and prepares as the intruder finally finds their way in. It turns out that the intruder is Dina, our protagonist from the previous movie, and she has arrived to plead for the woman's help. It turns out that the woman is actually C. Berman, the sole survivor of the Camp Nightwing massacre which happened back in 1978. Dina then takes C. Berman outside, and proceeds to show her the possessed Sam in her trunk. C. Berman looks mortified and refuses to help her save Sam at first, because she is convinced that there is no way to stop Sarah Fier, the infamous witch. However, she finally relents after Dina pleads to her by saying that she loves Sam, and can't let her die. Dina and Josh tie the possessed Sam up in the bathroom. They then move to the living room, where C. Berman proceeds to open up an old book. She takes out a picture of her and her sister at Camp Nightwing back at 1978, and says that a week after this picture was taken, her sister was dead. And so, C. Berman begins telling her story. The movie takes us back to 1978, where Ziggy Berman is shown running away from her bullies.
You're gonna hang, you witch.
Ziggy's bullies make fun of her by calling her a witch, and string her up to a tree infamously known as the hanging tree. Sheila, their leader, tries scaring her by saying that this is the tree where Sarah Fier, the infamous Shadyside's witch, was hanged back in 1666. Sheila then takes a lighter, and starts burning Ziggy's arm. Fortunately, the teens are interrupted by Kurt and Nick Good, the camp counselors. Kurt lets her off with a warning, and says that if Ziggy gets into trouble one more time, she's going to be sent home from camp. As Ziggy walks away from the scene, Nick approaches her and suggests that she should get her burn scar checked. It is clear from the way he talks with Ziggy that he has a crush on her. Ziggy, however, tries to push him away and sarcastically refers to him as King of Sunnyvale, and future police chief, before walking off. And, in case you forgot, Nick Good really does end up becoming the police chief in 1994. We then get introduced to Camp Nightwing, a summer camp shared by Shadysiders and Sunnyvalers alike. It looks peaceful and nothing appears out of the ordinary. We learn that the Shadysiders and Sunnyvalers are going to compete in a game called Color War tonight. Meanwhile, Ziggy's sister, Cindy Berman, is cleaning the camp's shared outhouse alongside her boyfriend, Tommy. They're both camp counselors, and while cleaning, she complains about the strange red moss that covers parts of the outhouse, saying that it's very hard to get off. Sensing her frustration, Tommy cheers her up by kissing her. Cindy moves away from him when she realizes their fellow counselors, Alice and Arnie, are not here cleaning the outhouse with them. She then storms inside the counselor's cabin, and finds Alice and Arnie having sex. Alice and Arnie are both junkies, and neither seems to have any sense of responsibility as counselors of Camp Nightwing. It is also clear that Alice dislikes Cindy, because the latter snitched on her at some point in the past. The uptight Cindy then tries to talk some sense into them to no avail. Frustrated, Cindy finally walks away and comes across Kurt, who informs her that her sister, Ziggy, got in trouble again. On the other side of the camp, Ziggy finally decides to visit the camp's infirmary, where Nurse Lane works. Nurse Lane looks distressed, and Ziggy tries asking her condition, but she changes the topic and starts focusing on Ziggy's burn scar instead. We can see that Nurse Lane is kind to her, and Ziggy finds comfort in her. However, things get intense when Nurse Lane starts bringing up about her daughter, Ruby Lane, the latest Shadyside serial killer. Nurse Lane is convinced that what happened wasn't a psychotic episode, but instead Sarah Fierre's curse, because Ruby Lane used to be a sweet girl and she couldn't possibly just snap. They are interrupted when Cindy bursts into the infirmary. The two sisters go outside, and Cindy starts reprimanding Ziggy about getting in trouble at camp. We learn that the two sisters don't get along, and that while Cindy is an optimistic goody two-shoes, Ziggy is the complete opposite. Later on, Cindy is scrubbing the mess hall while looking upset, ranting about her argument with Alice and Ziggy earlier. Tommy the boyfriend listens patiently, until Cindy breaks the sponge she's been scrubbing with out of frustration. She goes to the back room to retrieve a new sponge, right when she senses somebody moving through the room. Cindy investigates and finds the knife drawer open. Thinking that it's Tommy trying to prank her, she returns to the mess hall and finds him there, looking clueless. Nurse Lane suddenly shows up holding a knife. She is rambling about seeing Tommy's name on some wall, and that he's going to die no matter what tonight. Tommy is clearly confused by this. The two start brawling on the floor and Tommy manages to knock her out, while Cindy only watches, too stunned to move. Later on, paramedics rush the unconscious Nurse Lane into an ambulance, while a police officer questions Tommy about the incident. Ziggy watches Nurse Lane go with a solemn look, right when Sheila and her gang of bullies comes up to her, to brag that they vandalized Ziggy's cabin. Upset, Ziggy runs back to her cabin. Soon after, the campers get summoned to the mess hall because it's now dinner time. The kids are gossiping about the recent incident, saying that Sarah Fierre is back. Tommy is obviously still in shock, while Cindy is still skeptical that the witch even exists at all. Instead, she is convinced that Nurse Lane was on drugs. They are then interrupted by Kurt, who steps up to announce that they're going to commence the color war tonight. Despite the recent incident, the campers seem excited.
Launch the color war!
Cindy finds Ziggy in the arts and crafts cabin later, and tries to ask her if she possibly noticed anything about Nurse Lane's behavior. Ziggy is offended that Cindy thinks Nurse Lane was on drugs, and the two sisters get into an argument again. Ziggy shuts her down by saying that there is no hope for all Shadysiders, because they are all cursed no matter what. This hurts Cindy deeply because she has dreams of escaping the town.
Fake bullshit life of yours is gonna come crashing down.
I don't know who you are anymore, but you're not my sister.
Ziggy then opens the door to her cabin, and gives Cindy a glimpse of how her bullies has vandalized it, before slamming the door at her face. Later in the day, the color war begins, and all of the participants from both towns are preparing for it. Tommy is there, trying to explain the rules to the kids.
Okay, Jeremy, you may be the most important.
But he then hears an ominous whisper calling his name. Cindy walks up to him and asks him to help her. Together, they sneak into the infirmary and go through Nurse Lane's things. Cindy is set on proving that Nurse Lane was high on drugs. At this point, they find an unlabeled bottle of pill and a notebook that contains an odd symbol and a map, along with a passage that says, Sarah Fierre cut off her wicked hand on Satan's stone in exchange for eternal life, and puts on the symbol referred to as the witch's mark to bring darkness upon land. Suddenly, Alice and Arnie enter the infirmary, looking to steal drugs now that Nurse Lane isn't here to keep watch. They take the book and makes fun of the passages written on it, one of them being as long as Sarah Fierre's severed hand is still separated from her remains, the curse upon the land will persist. Inside the book, they find a hand-drawn map of the camp and discover that the camp is built over Union. In fact, Union was the original settlement before it was divided into Shadyside and Sunnyvale. Being the curious teens they are, they decide to investigate the places marked by Nurse Lane on the map. Alice and Arnie take away the unlabeled bottle from Cindy's purse, and decide to swallow the pills. Meanwhile, Ziggy is in her room, preparing to take revenge on Sheila, the leader of the bullies, by dunking red paint over her head. Nick Good comes knocking and offers to help her, claiming that he has a better idea. Despite her initial reluctance, she eventually agrees. Cindy, Tommy, Alice, and Arnie are now exploring the woods. They rush toward Alice because she just fell inside a recently dug hole. It appears that Nurse Lane had been digging holes in the woods, and the X's marked on the map are spots Nurse Lane has dug. They go through the book some more, and theorize that Nurse Lane must have been searching for Sarah Fierre's hand to end the curse, while Cindy remains skeptical of the so-called curse's existence. Arnie then announces that he's found the witch's house, and the teens decide to enter it to check it out.
Are you crazy? Alice!
Upon exploring, they notice that someone visited this place recently.
Like recently?
As they go in deeper, they discover that the weird symbol they found on the book is engraved on the floor. They conclude that this must be the witch's mark, while Arnie announces that the drugs he just took just kicked in, and he finally realizes what kind of drugs it is. It's only Tylenol, meaning Nurse Lane wasn't high on drugs when she attacked Tommy earlier. Bored, Arnie goes back to the front room to check on Tommy while Cindy and Alice stay by the symbol, where Cindy discovers a cave hidden behind the bookshelf. Alice then pulls her to show her a wall with the names of Shadyside serial killers engraved on them. But the strange thing is Tommy's name is engraved right at the bottom of the stone below all the other serial killers. In the other room, Arnie is with a broody-looking Tommy, trying to get him to snap out of it. Right as Cindy and Alice enter the room, Tommy picks up an axe. Cindy and Alice shriek in fear upon the sight and run for their lives. They crawl inside the cave behind the bookshelf, but Tommy manages to grab Cindy's leg. Lucky for the girls, the cave collapses behind them, and separates them from Tommy for now. The possessed Tommy then makes his way outside, and heads towards the camp. Suffice to say, things are about to get bloody. Back at the camp, the campers are in the middle of their color war. Sheila the bully then gets passed a message from one of her peers, saying that it is from Will Good. The message tells Sheila to get inside the outhouse. And so she goes, while blindly thinking that the handsome and charming Will Good is about to surprise her with something romantic. However, when she gets inside one of the stalls, a bucket full of disgusting critters drops on her head. They make sure to lock Sheila inside the outhouse, so that she won't come after them. Inside the cave, Cindy seems desperate to look for a way out, while the shaken Alice is still trying to process her boyfriend's death. Cindy still believes that Tommy must have taken some sort of drug that rendered him insane, and Alice gets furious. Alice has now connected the dots, and figured out what Nurse Lane was up to out here. Nurse Lane actually went looking for the hand bone to break the curse and save Shadyside, but she couldn't find it. Instead, she discovered Cindy's boyfriend's name on that wall, so she attempted to murder him. Alice's theory makes perfect sense. Nurse Lane tried to kill Tommy earlier to prevent him from slaughtering the rest of the campers. But as we saw earlier, she failed. Cindy is overwhelmed by Alice's explanation, and shoves Alice away. She still refuses to believe about the witch's curse, and decides to venture the cave alone to look for an exit. After that, Cindy takes a look at the book, and finally realizes that the symbol is actually a map of the entire cave system. With this discovery, they now have a chance of getting out. Back at the camp, a nerdy Shadyside kid poses as the jailer during Color War, but not long after his Sunnyvale prisoners escape. Poor nerdy kid is now all alone. He fixes his glasses, turns around, and... Meanwhile, Nick and Ziggy are now in the Science and Nature building, playing 13 questions and bonding with each other. They flirt a little and we see that Ziggy is also attracted to him. At this point, Nick admits that his dad dropped a huge burden on him to continue the family legacy, because the Good family is highly respected and powerful in Sunnyvale. Plus, he decided to take this burden with a heavy heart because he has two. He also finally confesses that he likes her, and they share a kiss. Nick and Ziggy run toward the source of the commotion, and gasp in horror when they find the nerdy kid slaughtered. Inside the cave, Cindy and Alice are now following the map. The two arrive at the heart of the cave and find a gigantic, pulsing organ, resembling a heart. As if entranced by a spell, Alice moves to touch it, and she immediately begins to see visions of past Shadyside serial killers. Alice starts seeing visions of dead people, including Cindy. She starts running in panic, until she falls to the ground and breaks her leg. The camp is now in a state of emergency, and everyone is summoned to the mess hall. Despite her earlier hostility, Ziggy still loves and cares about her sister and wants to look for her, but Nick pleads her to stay put. Instead, he volunteers to go outside to look for the rest of the campers, as well as Cindy and the other counselors. Right after Nick leaves, though, Ziggy finally remembers something. Sheila is still locked inside the outhouse. She goes outside to help her. Back in the cave, Cindy moves to realign Alice's broken leg. Cindy admits now that she believes that Witch's curse is real, because of what she just witnessed. They finally stop fighting and make peace with each other, after Cindy apologizes for ever snitching on Alice. Cindy then notices something behind Alice. The strange red moss she found in the outhouse is all over this part of the cave, meaning they're getting close to the camp. At the camp, a few Shadysiders are huddled inside a building in the dark.
Check with Counselor Good.
Hey, we need.
As one of them tries to light a match,
Shit.
Tommy appears and kills them all. On the other side of the camp, Ziggy has now reached the outhouse. She gets jumped by a furious Sheila. Ziggy knocks her out right when Counselor Gary arrives. Then all of a sudden, the two start hearing voices coming from below. Ziggy opens a toilet lid and sees Cindy and Alice.
Cindy?
She then reaches for a bucket on a rope to get them out. Meanwhile, Nick Good finds the remains of slaughtered campers, and happens upon a freaked out Kurt. Realizing this has gone too far, Nick instructs Kurt to pack all of the campers on a bus and take them away. Inside the outhouse, Ziggy is lowering the bucket to get Cindy and Alice out. Cindy lets Alice get on first, while Ziggy and Gary pull from upstairs. But Tommy suddenly appears and slashes Gary's head, until he falls down the cave with Alice. Ziggy runs for her life and comes across Nick Good. They go and hide inside the science building. Nick tells her that there's a bus leaving camp in a bit and that they have to get on. Ziggy initially refuses, because she doesn't want to leave her sister behind, but Nick coaxes her to it by saying that by escaping the camp they'd be able to call the cops and get help. But it's not going to be that easy. Tommy enters the building. Ziggy and Nick try to keep still so he won't find them. Unfortunately, Tommy manages to find them, and Nick gets slashed while trying to protect Ziggy. Nick tells Ziggy to go save herself, and Tommy goes straight after her. Down at the cave, Cindy and Alice go through the book again, and read the lore about Sarah Fier. Alice points out that according to the lore, Sarah Fier emerged at the meeting house with one hand severed. Today, the meeting house has been converted to the mess hall, meaning that Cindy simply has to follow the direction to the mess hall from the outhouse. Alice tells Cindy to leave her behind, saying she'd catch up in a bit. Meanwhile, Ziggy tries to catch the bus but fails. She resumes running while Tommy keeps going after her. Now left alone, Alice begins to get a nosebleed. She studies the book again and finds that apparently, one would get a nosebleed when Sarah Fier is near. Alice reaches around the moss, searching for something. Cindy, on the other hand, arrives right under the mess hall, and begins trying to take out the steel grill to climb up. Just so happens, Ziggy arrives at the mess hall. She puts on loud music to keep Tommy distracted and goes to hide. Tommy arrives inside the mess hall later, while Cindy begins kicking the steel grate to get out. He enters the storage room while Ziggy sneaks up behind him, but then the music stops. Ziggy puts a bag over his head, perfecting his look that we saw in the previous movie. Ziggy manages to escape the room and out into the kitchen while Tommy goes after her. Tommy moves to strike her, and then Cindy appears from behind, and stabs her ex-boyfriend in order to save her sister. Now reunited, Cindy and Ziggy embrace each other in relief. They apologize to each other and promise to look after each other from now on. But then, they start hearing noises coming from down the cave. Cindy goes to investigate. It is only Alice. She now has found Sarah Fier's severed hand. The three girls lay the hand bone on the table, and Alice explains that according to the lore, to end the curse they must reunite the hand with the rest of the body. It is said that Sarah Fier's body is buried under the hanging tree, just outside of camp. Ziggy starts getting a nosebleed, and as her blood hits the bone, Ziggy gets glimpses of the witch, just like Sam. Meanwhile, down at the heart of the cave, black goo starts forming the shape of a person. and upstairs, Tommy's supposedly dead body starts twitching. When they're about to leave for the hanging tree, Tommy appears out of nowhere and kills Alice immediately. Now that Ziggy has seen the witch, the dead killers are coming back to life, and they're after Ziggy. Cindy decapitates Tommy in hopes of stopping him from coming back. But then, Ruby Lane climbs out of the hole, prompting Ziggy and Cindy to run.
There it is. Go.
The sisters reach the hanging tree and start digging, while the dead killers start approaching. They then stop digging to find nothing but a rock that says the witch forever lives, meaning that wherever Sarah Fierre's dead body is, it is not here. They are now surrounded by the killers, Billy Barker, the milkman, Tommy the Camp Nightwing killer, and Ruby Lane. With no other option, Cindy starts pleading to the killers to no avail. She then tells Ziggy to run while she stays and fights them off. She pushes Ziggy aside and faces off against Tommy. Unfortunately, as Ziggy tries escaping, the milkman manages to catch her. She gets stabbed over and over, while Cindy gets axed repeatedly by her side. During their final breaths, the sisters reach for each other and lie dead side by side. Moments pass, and we see Nick Good arrive at the scene. He instantly reaches for Ziggy and begins performing CPR. In the end, Ziggy manages to survive. When she gets taken into an ambulance later, we learn that Ziggy is actually just a nickname, and that her real name is Christine Berman. In fact, C. Berman is not short for Cindy Berman, but Christine Berman, aka Ziggy. Back in 1994, she tells Josh and Dina that she tried convincing Nick that the whole story about Sarah Fierre is real, but Nick doesn't believe her to this day. Now that she's finished telling her story, Dina tells her that they have found Sarah Fierre's body, so all Ziggy has to do is tell them where the hand is. As it turns out, Camp Nightwing has now turned into Shadyside Mall in 1994. Dina and Josh retrieve the hand, while Ziggy makes a call to Sheriff Nick Good, knowing that they'd probably need his help more than ever now. On the other side of town, Dina tells Josh to wait in the car while she goes into the woods alone. At last, she reunites the severed hand with the rest of the body. But then, Dina is transported back to 1666. It is at this point that she sees Sarah Fierre's face in her reflection. She turns when somebody calls her name, only it's not Dina anymore. Okay guys. Stay tuned for the final trilogy, which I'll upload in the next video. Thanks for watching.